Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedant Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Pashyatai Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Prabhu, you have to make me a co-host so I can start the presentation.
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So, Hare Krishna, thank you all for joining us on a new timing. We are meeting almost 1.5 hours earlier. So, sorry for that change, but I hope all of you are able to accommodate to it. I mean, I did it because many had asked for an earlier time, and now as I was available from this week, so I thought it'd be good to start it early. So we are doing our Gita Essence, which is an overview of Bhagavad Gita, and is based on the teachings and the writings of His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So today we'll be discussing chapter 5. So let's do a quick recap of what has happened in the past and why Arjuna begins the chapter 5 with a question. So just to give a little bit of history or historical context in regards of a discussion between Arjuna and Krishna. So in chapter 2, Lord Shri Krishna revealed the true identity of a living entity to Arjuna, where Lord Shri Krishna said, hey Arjuna, you're not the body, but a spirit soul. And after that, Lord Shri Krishna spoke about how to realize it, that I am not the body, but a spirit, because the experience of the world teaches us the way we live our life. It feels like that I am this body. So what is a process that I can accept, should I take, by which I can rise above this bodily consciousness? So Lord Shri Krishna introduces that in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita as Buddhi Yoga. You can call it Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. So there Lord Shri Krishna explained. However, Arjuna was not very clear about his fundamental doubt. What was his fundamental doubt? And his fundamental doubt was that he wanted to walk away from the war. In other words, he didn't want to do his duty as a Kshatriya. Of course, it was a difficult task to be performed, to fight with one's own relatives. And of course, a lot of people are going to die. But that's the dharma of Kshatriya. If he has to protect dharma, he has to fight. So in that context, Arjuna was not willing to perform his duty. So he was confused. My dear Lord, should I renounce or should I work? What is better? And with that query or inquiry, chapter 3 began, where Lord Shri Krishna explained what is real renunciation. And there Lord Shri Krishna explained that it is not about giving up work. That is not renunciation exactly. If you artificially give up work, but if you have a desire for enjoyment, enjoying this world, then you will be called as a pretender. So Lord Shri Krishna explains that Arjuna, it is not about giving up work, but it is about giving up the controllership mentality and the desires for sense gratification that binds us with this material world. When Arjuna heard this, he appreciated this practical approach of Karma Yoga that Krishna explained, that by performing your work, you can actually attain to self-realization. And that's a more practical way, because you don't have to artificially give up your engagements and activities. However, as you know, in chapter 3, Arjuna said, my dear Lord, I'm convinced what you're saying. I'm determined to fight. But as the experience of the world teaches, that many times we get excited in the beginning, but we fail to keep our commitment and promises for long. Our determination goes down or fades away with time. What is that causes us to, or what is that forces us to act against our own will? That's the time Lord Shri Krishna began the discussion of the topic called as enemy of the soul. Hare Krishna. Gaurav Prabhu, I have disabled the unmute function. So let's not enable it now. So everyone will remain muted that way. And I hope as a host, you have the right to unmute yourself. So let's keep it disabled. So at that point of time in chapter 3, Lord Shri Krishna then tells Arjuna about the concept of enemy of the soul. And Krishna says, Kama esha krodesha rajoguna samadvaha. Hey Arjuna, it is because of Kama that we get distracted from our determination to live a righteous life. And people are forced to perform sinful activities, although they know that's not correct. And that's the time Lord Shri Krishna, while explaining about karma, he explained that it is our eternal enemy and it burns like fire. And there in that chapter 3, Lord Shri Krishna gave a 3-step strategy or formula to win over this lust, which is an eternal enemy for every living entity. In essence, Lord Shri Krishna concluded the discussion on this eternal lust by saying or telling Arjuna, hey Arjuna, if you want to defeat this lust, you should cultivate transcendental knowledge. With that transcendental knowledge, with the weapon of transcendental knowledge, you'll be able to break the bonds or break this illusion or this lust that has binded you for so long. Now, great transcendental knowledge. But what is transcendental knowledge? And that is what begins with chapter 4. Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, you want me to cultivate transcendental knowledge, but what is it? And how do I receive it? And then Lord Shri Krishna begins to explain what is transcendental knowledge, the glories of transcendental knowledge, and how to receive it or how to achieve it in chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. However, Lord Shri Krishna, while explaining the glories of transcendental knowledge, at one point of time, Lord glorifies transcendental knowledge, which means jnana. Simultaneously, Lord Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, hey Arjuna, you should perform your duty. So by the time the discussion in chapter 4 ended about the glories of transcendental knowledge, and then Lord Shri Krishna concludes that you should perform your duty, Arjuna again is confused. So Arjuna, at this point of time, at the end of chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, which we concluded last weekend, now Arjuna is thinking, am I supposed to cultivate jnana? Which according to Arjuna means to take a path of renunciation? If yes, if jnana is superior, transcendental knowledge is superior, then why Lord is asking me to fight, that I do my dharma? In other words, do karma yoga. So here at this point of time, Arjuna is not able to understand how we can attain perfection of life by performing our karma in relation to the Supreme Lord. Because of this confusion, Arjuna is thinking that it is better for me to go into the solitude and perform tapasya. And with my experience of discussing the subject matter of Bhagavad Gita all these years, this is one of the common questions that people have. And the common question that they have is, how can I remember Lord while I'm working? When people become a little serious about it, they feel, oh, it's very difficult to engage in my occupational duty, family responsibilities, and yet remember Krishna. Better I renounce everything. So then, like all of you brahmacharis and the renunciates or sannyasis, whole day and night I can sit and chant the holy names of the Lord and remember, hear the glories of the Lord. And with that, I open the forum today with a very first question for all of you, which you will see on your screen. How many of you have had thoughts like this of temporary renunciation, where we felt that living our current life, where we have to perform duties, it's very difficult to remember Lord. I should also renounce, go away, so I can remember the Lord. How many of you had that experience? And maybe some of you not. And some of you may be unsure. You can take a few more seconds to think about it. But as I said, as far as I'm aware of, as well as my interaction, that is what most of the people think. And yes, at one point in time, I was also thinking when I was working, oh, it's so difficult to practice Krishna consciousness. There's so much anxieties and whatnot. So yeah, people have this. Now, but the catch here is, it's just a thought. It is not easy to act on it. When a person thinks about that I should renounce, then he also thinks, oh, I cannot renounce. If in case somebody is married, I have a family. I have too many desires yet to be fulfilled. What do I do? Now, at this point, this junction becomes a junction of a crisis for an individual. As you can see, the results, many of you have said, 72% people have said, yes, we have had these thoughts. Renouncing would be better. But if we are not properly guided, and if we are not properly cultivating knowledge, many times I have seen in our own, preaching endeavors that many times people join, they become very enthusiastic, they take it very seriously, they do very nicely. However, prematurely, by not finding an answer to this conflict that they're going through in their life, how do I connect my work in relation to the Lord? Sometimes people come to a conclusion where they make a conclusion that spirituality is too difficult. I guess I would be far happy with the struggles of material life. And when a person comes to this conclusion, then people give up the spiritual practice prematurely. In this regard, Srila Prabhupada taught us that if people think the spiritual life is difficult, then they should know for sure that material life is impossible. And that's the reason many times these people come back after going back again to the material life and they realize that actually material life is impossible. There's no way we can continue living that way. And with a similar question, chapter 5 opens up where Arjuna is also in that crisis and where he asks, my dear Lord, what should I do? What do you want me to do? Should I fight? Should I renounce? It's a similar question with the chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita opens up. But here right now is, as I said, as I gave you the little bit of historical context, he's still attached to his understanding of renunciation. He has not yet clearly understood the role of karma yoga in giving perfection to life. And why is he having that doubt? We'll discuss that today in today's session. Along with this subject matter, where Lord Shri Krishna is going to speak in this chapter 5 in depth about the glories of Karma Yoga and how Karma Yoga is far better than the path of renunciation. Along with that, Lord Shri Krishna is going to speak on 3 very profound subject matters. The very first subject matter after this Karma Yoga is the doers. All of us would agree that we all think, just like I am speaking. It's very easy to say that I am speaking. I am the one who is performing the act right now. Let's say a man is walking. Of course, he's going to say that he is walking. So in other words, this idea that I am the doer is very deeply rooted in our consciousness. However, Lord Shri Krishna reveals a great secret here, where Krishna tells Arjuna, you're not the only doer. There are 3 doers. And unless these 3 doers fall in a line, which means unless these 3 doers, all 3 of them gives a sanction, you cannot perform an activity. So we'll look into that. Second, very interesting subject matter discussed in this chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita is the vision of a spiritualist. In this, Lord Shri Krishna would explain how spirituality unifies and promotes universal brotherhood across races, human races, and also across species. A very important subject matter. And third and the last is about the peace formula, which I believe if you are aware of what's happening around the world or what's happening on the eastern and the western border of India, the conflicts across India-China border, and I believe there's some conflict on the India-Pakistan border, all of us would agree the subject matter of peace formula or the peace is a need of the hour. And we know despite all the efforts at international level by forums such as United Nations, etc., and whatnot, world had been and is still in conflict. So how to live peacefully with each other is a very important question in today's troubled times. And here Lord Shri Krishna would give us a simple formula, a simple understanding that how we can find peace. Everyone is aiming at global peace. And Lord Shri Krishna would tell us the process of attaining that global peace, which begins with finding an inner peace. Once a person is able to find his inner peace, then global peace can be discussed, talked, or can be attained. So, with that, to get into the details of the subject matter, let's begin our discussion on chapter 5, and with the acronym for chapter 5 as STEP, STEP, where S stands for stay in the world. In other words, how to live our life so that rather than becoming entangled in our material lives, the complexities, the problems, and then creating future birth in the material world, how we can be part of this world, live our life, yet be liberated or become liberated from the miseries of material life. Like in chapter 4, Lord Shri Krishna introduced the subject matter of karma. Karma, vikarma, and akarma. So, akarma is devotional service and activities which are performed as a service to the Lord, which could be a job where the mother serving in a kitchen, that could be a devotional service if it is done in that context. However, the first karma and vikarma is sinful activities should be given up. Karma, which is a pious activity, Lord Shri Krishna says that should also be given up. Either karma or vikarma, both are binding. For vikarma, we have to face sinful reactions. For karma, again, we have to take birth in the future to accept the pious results. In other words, both karma and vikarma are binding. So therefore, Lord Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, be part of this world and continue performing karma yoga. Do not give up on the engagement of your senses because we are an active living beings and we cannot live without performing activities. How many of you agree at all times our mind is always thinking about, is always planning of the future? We cannot sit idle, it's just not possible. And that's what Lord Shri Krishna speaks in this particular section. In essence, this particular section, the first section of chapter 5, from verse number 1 to 12, compares karma yoga with the path of renunciation, where Lord Shri Krishna very clearly tells that both aims at the same goal. However, the path of karma yoga is far easier than the path of renunciation. Because to practice karma yoga, there is no prerequisite qualification. However, to practice the path of renunciation or jnana yoga, there is a prerequisite qualification, and that is one has to be freed from material desires. That's a very, very difficult qualification to attain for everyone. However, for karma yoga, even if you have material desires, you can still be part of a spiritual life and a spiritual culture just by utilizing some of the results that you earn or that you acquire in the service of the Lord. We spoke about yoga ladder in chapter 3, where we talked about this karma yoga as two parts, sakam and nishkam. Sakam means you have your desires and yet you serve the Lord with the results that you acquire. And that's the way we get purified. So we'll give you a summary of the section and a simple tabular format in a simple tabular format to give you an idea of it. What should I do? Should I take to the path of karma yoga or should I practice renunciation? So work in devotion means karma yoga. Lord Shri Krishna says, work in devotion is better. Why? Because we are active beings and karma yoga allows us to act according to our propensities, guna and karma. Thus, in that way, we can stay happily engaged. Whereas in renunciation, we have to give up all activities, but it becomes very difficult unless a person is really, really advanced or qualified for that situation. And that's the reason Krishna is telling Arjuna, Arjuna, you think you can practice renunciation, but you don't know. You're bound by your guna and karma. When you'll go to the forest, and if somebody will come and challenge you, you are a Kshatriya. You will be bound, you'll be forced to act according to Kshatriya propensity, and you will not be able to tolerate the challenge. You will fight. So, in other words, Lord Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, you're not ready for path of renunciation. Thus, purify yourself through the process of karma yoga. So that's the first point. Second, the process of karma yoga itself purifies the heart. As I said, there is no prerequisite requirement or qualification needed. Anyone can engage in karma yoga once he understands Krishna is a supreme personality of Godhead, with that understanding, he can very well take to Karma Yoga process. Whereas for renunciation, it is not a 100% solution. It is not necessarily that it's going to purify the heart, because it depends on the practice of your Jnana Yoga or the practice of renunciation. Secondly, there are a lot of chances of fall down. Because if a person who is unqualified take to renunciation, when his mind and senses becomes agitated because he wants to some desires to be fulfilled, then a person will fall down from the process of renunciation. Whereas Karma Yoga, by serving the Lord, it purifies the consciousness. That's the inherent part of it. Third, Lord Shri Krishna explains as glories of Karma Yoga, it's a joyful process. Your senses are engaged. You know, however, in renunciation, you have to withdraw your senses, you have to negate. There's a lot of austerities you have to perform. Look at in Krishna consciousness. If all of you have visited ISKCON temples, have attended Sunday feast, after every Sunday feast, there is a very nice, delicious prasadam feast which is offered. That's the reason Sunday program is called as Sunday Love Feast or Sunday Feast. You have a feast of Krishna Katha, then Kirtan, and then Prasadam. However, if somebody is on the path of Jnana or Jnana Yoga or renunciation, forget getting pineapple halwa or gulab jamun or nobody or anything. Whereas in Karma Yoga, you can very happily eat all this vegetarian diet after offering to Krishna. That way, you don't forcefully choke yourself, and yet by honoring Krishna Prasadam, one purifies. So it's a joyful process, it's happily engaged. That's the reason Krishna's devotees are generally happy, are smiling. We don't take to that path of extreme renunciations. Another point that Krishna says is the complete renunciation. Now, what is complete renunciation in this regard? Because here a person has a knowledge that Krishna is a supreme personality of Godhead. I am an eternal part and parcel of the Lord. I come empty-handed in this world, right? Did any one of you came along with a baggage? Any one of you had a key to a bank locker where you had stocked a lot of wealth in your previous life? Or do you all agree that you all came naked, empty-handed, had no clue why you came here? So we all come empty-handed, and matter of fact is, maybe we know or not, but the truth is, we all gonna go empty-handed. None of us gonna take anything when we leave from this world. However, we spend all our life as if we're gonna take everything that we have earned at the end of life. So complete renunciation in the sense that the living entity or the karma yogi recognizes and understands that everything belongs to Krishna. He is a supreme personality, a Godhead. Whereas for a jnani, it is a partial renunciation because he's in the search of the absolute truth. The Jnana Marg is about searching about the absolute truth. So he's not very sure. He may end up to a conclusion where he may think that I am also Supreme Lord. I am Narayan, you are Narayan. So there are a lot of risks like that. So Lord Shri Krishna says, hey Arjun, so don't mess around with your life. It's a very difficult. And imagine if Arjuna was such a qualified person, such a sense-controlled person, such a great bowman in the whole world, if for him to take to the path of renunciation, Krishna is saying is not easy. Follow the path of Karma Yoga. I guess that's possibly the blessing for us. So some of you might wonder, Prabhu, what about the renunciation is gone? Are they Karma Yogi practitioners or the Jnana Yogi practitioners? Well, it's a mix of that in both. Because the people who take to the path of renunciation, they do it under the guidance and the blessings of Guru and Gauranga. It is not something which somebody does it abruptly. And that person, when he takes that path, then he works under the guidance of his seniors or Guru, or whoever is a leader for that person. So when a renunciate is working under the guidance of a senior, then he's safe, he's guarded, then his renunciation is pakka. But if somebody does not work under the guidance, works by himself, then there is a risk for that person to fall down. Otherwise, in general, in ISKCON, that's the culture. So if somebody chooses the path of renunciation, until and unless an enough spirit of renunciation is seen in that person, none of the temples, none of the community allows that person to take to this path. However, at large, we do offer training at different temples where training is given to the youth where they can see for themselves what do they want to do. But that's a point. Now, the details of Karma Yoga would be discussed more later on in the 12th chapter. That's the time I will speak about what it means for a renunciate, what it means for a grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasi. But for this time, for this point of time, you can understand what Lord Shri Krishna is trying to say here is all of us are forced to act according to our acquired nature. It is better to engage that way rather than giving up activities, saying that I'll give up my job, I will take to a an artificial form of renunciation, I'll go to the forest. That is not a workable solution which Krishna is speaking about here. And finally, Lord Shri Krishna says, through this process of Karma Yoga, you can quickly attain to the Supreme. However, Jnana Yoga path is a very tedious and tough journey. And that's the essence. That's the essence of it, where Krishna says, and now Arjuna is clear that yes, I have understood, my dear Lord, Karma Yoga is indeed the best and the safest route for me to perform my duties and to progress in my spiritual life. So Arjuna is happy. However, Arjuna still have a doubt, and he's thinking, "My dear Lord, how to act in Karma Yoga? I have to be a Karma Yogi, but how am I supposed to act?" I believe that would be a question for all of you. What I'm supposed to do? What does a Karma Yogi do? How does he act? And that Lord Krishna explains in the 7th to the 12th verse. And I'll give you a 3-point summary of it. Lord Shri Krishna says, for a Karma Yogi, his work becomes his worship or yoga when he acts in these 3 following ways. First, this is 7th verse, where a person lives a regulated life. In other words, keeping his mind and senses under control. In other words, Krishna is saying where a person performs a regulated life, following a spiritual culture, like of ABCD that we have discussed, if he does so, and if he acts in that manner, then he's acting as a Karma Yogi. Because of by living a spiritual culture, by practicing the rules of the spiritual culture, the person will be able to keep his mind and senses under control, under regulation. That's the first thing. Second, a Karma Yogi acts without attachment, or he has no desires for results. What it means that a Karma Yogi knows that the body that I have, this vehicle by which I perform all the actions, is a gift of the Lord. Therefore, let me use this vehicle of the body in the service of the Lord by performing my prescribed duty. And let me be detached, because ultimately Krishna is the supreme controller, not I. So for a Karma Yogi, his work becomes yajna or a sacrifice. Now, how yajna sacrifice is just not a matter of thinking Prabhupada writes. It is not just by thinking that you're going to work without attachment to results. It has to be applied. And what is that application? Which is the third point, where the person acts with his body, mind, and senses only for the process of purification, which means he is conscious of the goal, that the goal is a self-realization, and he has to gain freedom from material desire, freedom from material miseries, and he wants to gain access to eternal life. So when he performs action, he is detached. He is not, disturbing his mind by being too conscious about what would be the results of my action. I believe all of us would agree, whatever action we perform, that action is dominated by the thought, what will I gain from it? Yes or no? I could have had a poll question here, but I don't have a poll here. If you have chat enabled, you can reply yes or no, so I at least get to know what's going on. I've enabled the chat for all of you. Do you all agree, whatever action we perform, behind every action there is a thought, what will I gain? What will be the result? What will I attain out of it? And that is what Lord Shri Krishna is saying. Give up that. Don't get so conscious about what will you gain. Rather, you perform an activity as a service, as a prescribed duty. And when you get the result of it, it's a very important thing, huh? You cannot purify yourself if you just use all the results for yourself. When you get the results, then learn to use the part of the result, portion of the result, in the service of the Lord. And that is what means by cultivating detachment. Because you understand, our attachment is with the result. We are too conscious of the result. So unless we start using the result of our work in the service of the Lord, we cannot become purified of this attachment to the result. And that's what karma yoga, and that's how when we act, work becomes worship. And what is the result of it? Lord Shri Krishna explains in this section itself. The result is a performer. When a person acts with these three principles that we discussed, where he is conscious of his work, he does it as a service to the Lord and uses the result in the service of the Lord, then the performer is unaffected by sinful action. Now, what do you mean by sinful action here? Lord Shri Krishna says it. And he's speaking to Arjuna because to fight and to kill, there would be some sin performed. He might have to kill his elder brother, his teacher like Dronacharya, his great grandfather Bhishma Pitama. So he may accrue some sin. So there, Lord Shri Krishna says, well, if you act as a service, act as I explained you, then you will not incur any sin. To give you an example in your context, imagine one of you is working in an IT company and you are a developer, you're a coder, and you write a code. I believe most of you, probably those who are coders, you don't know exactly how ultimately that code gets utilized. Is that correct? Because people work in a very, very minuscule roles in the big structures, and they really don't know exactly what's going on at the end of the product cycle. Imagine that code is being utilized in a machine which is being used in the slaughterhouse to automate the killing of animals. That's a sinful action, serious sinful action. And your piece of code is managing that action. That's a sinful action. You cannot say that I didn't know, but the point is the law of karma is so stringent, you know or not, but any part of your action is utilized for any sinful action, we get a sinful reaction. That's what the law of karma is. So how a performer is unaffected by sinful action? Well, because he is not aware of it. If you are aware, then you should walk away. But if somebody is unaware and then he practices karma yoga and he uses the results of his work in the service of the Lord, then it is clear, then it is understood by the laws of the Lord that the person is not acting for one's own selfish interest. He's performing that task as a service. So he is not considered sinful, or he does not get a sinful reaction at that point of time. So we are saved from sinful reaction. In any words, that is a karma. When you perform devotional service as a work, as a service to the Lord, neither you get pious credit nor you get impious credit. That's the point. Secondly, a karma yogi or a bhakta yogi or a buddhi yogi is very dear to all, and everyone is dear to him. How he is dear to all? Because his mind and senses are under control. Obviously, the person becomes dear to everyone. All reasons of conflict which happens, is because of uncontrolled tongue and uncontrolled mind. All of you probably would agree. It all begins with a harsh speech. And the harsh speech begins with our uncontrolled mind, where we keep on thinking a lot of things. And everyone is dear to him because he sees everyone as a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And the third result, such a person, practitioner of bhakti yoga or karma yoga or buddhi yoga, he has no anxiety. He attains peace. To give you an example, imagine you're working as a cashier for a bank. All the money that comes and goes out goes through your hands. You are the one who calculate and count, and you dispatch or you receive and all that. But you have zero anxiety about the money that has just come out of your hand. Let's say that money is, now the van has come, the bank van, which is going to take the money and take it to another branch. You will have zero anxiety about it. Would it be stolen or not? Because you know that money does not belong to me. My duty here is just to count and document and to hand it over to the responsible person. What happens with the money in afterwards, it is not my jurisdiction to worry about it. Similarly, when a person works in this consciousness, then I am supposed to perform my duty. Ultimately, the results are awarded by the Lord, which we're going to discuss in the next topic now, the doer, then I should just not worry about it. Let me just give up this karmatmakam consciousness attached to work and just do my duty peacefully. If we do so, such a person can live anxiety-free life. And it's a challenge. It's not easy. How many of you agree, by the way? It's not that easy to give up, to not have anxieties in our life, because ultimately we all are very much attached to the result consciousness or to the idea of result. To summarize this first section of discussion, in essence, Lord Shri Krishna is saying here, one who controls his mind and senses, one who works with the detachment, which means one who uses the results in the service of the Lord, and who acts for the purification of one's consciousness, then such a work performed by that worker becomes his worship. So, for most people, it would be premature and detrimental to sever their ties with the worldly relationships and duties for the sake of spiritual perfection, because it's just not possible. Thus, Lord Shri Krishna says to Arjuna, the path of Karma Yoga offers a progressive means of spiritual development while simultaneously staying in the world. And here, Lord Shri Krishna concludes this with giving an example of a lotus. A lotus has a very special feature. Although it grows in a pond, but it is never wet by the water of the pond. You put a water, you put a droplet, it immediately slips out. So Lord Shri Krishna says, a karma yogi or a devotee of the Lord is like a lotus who is part of the pond but is not affected by the pond. Arjuna was amazed. Arjuna said, this is fantastic, my dear Lord. Correct. But how can I be detached from actions which are performed by me? It is very easy to speak about detachment, and all that, but ultimately it's not that easy. And that's the second question for all of you. What do you think? Do you believe that it is easy to speak to others about detachment, but when it comes to oneself to be detached, it becomes very challenging? To give you an example, let's imagine you are a parent and you have a child, and let's say there is a child of a neighbor, and both of them study in the same school in the same grade. If a neighbor's child, let's say, fails in the exam, I believe it will be fairly simple for all of us to say, oh, that's all right. Probably she worked hard and couldn't score good marks. That's all right. But I believe all of you would agree, when if your child would fail, it would not be that easy to say, oh, that's all right. You failed. You worked hard. No, it won't be that easy, because we have an expectation tied to it. So when it comes to others, it's always easy to speak about detachment. Don't be detached. But when it comes to oneself, it's very, very difficult. And I can tell you, as a speaker, I'm speaking this and it's an experience. It's not easy always. So for that, I'll conclude the polling here. The result speaks for itself. 74% of you say yes, it's easy to speak, but not easy to follow. It's very difficult to follow. So here Lord Shri Krishna is going to address this particular issue and is going to debunk and going to give a very fantastic concept. Oh, we're already 6:44. I'm too slow today. Okay, the concept of three doers. Lord Shri Krishna speaks about it. Generally, people think anything good happens, then I am the cause for it. When anything bad happens, people generally tend to believe others. But here in this concept, Lord Shri Krishna is going to speak about who is the actual performer. Are you the performer or someone else the performer? So what is the truth? Let's take a look at it. Lord Shri Krishna says, I'll be a little quick this time. Lord Shri Krishna says, who is the real doer? I've given you the verse number. You can please do read it later on. Krishna says, conditioned soul, which means you and I, Jivatma, although he thinks he is the doer, but he is not. Oh, really? I'm not the doer? That's a fantastic news. I can do whatever I want to do because I'm not the doer. Well, if that's the case, then the fourth chapter, Lord Shri Krishna spoke about karma, vikarma, karma, holds no meaning. If I'm not the doer, then how can I be held responsible for my actions? There has to be something else. So is that correct? Then I'm not the doer, then I should not be held responsible for my actions? Well, Lord Shri Krishna says, wait a second. Don't blame me for your actions. So who is responsible for the action which is performed by a living entity, although he is not performing it? Krishna said like this in 5:14. So in 5:15, Lord Shri Krishna says, Man proposes, God disposes. What it means, man proposes and God disposes. Krishna says, Arjuna, it is you who are held responsible because it was your proposal and the God disposes it or gives you sanction. So, to give you a concept, what it means, man proposes, God disposes. There are three doers. And what are the three doers and what are their roles in you performing any action through this body? First is the soul, who we are, the real identity. The soul can only desire. To give you to do a little reflective exercise, again, I don't have a poll here. Maybe you all can use a chat box to say yes or no. Uh, think about it. All of us have had so many desires all through our life. If I am actually the doer, then why we fail to fulfill all our desires? Is there anyone here on the forum who has been able to fulfill all his desires? Whatever he thinks, he's able to do it. Because if I am the doer, then whatever I desire, I should be able to do it. Yes or no? Agreed? If I am the doer, I should be able to do it. But that just doesn't happen because we are Jivatma. Only person who can think and fulfill his desires is Krishna. So, first thing, so we are not the doer, that is clear. All right. So, what happens if soul only desires, then how does an action is performed? Then comes super soul. He is a second doer. The first doer is Atma, begins with desire. Second doer is soul, super soul. The super soul sanctions. And how does super soul sanctions? The super soul sanctions based on the karmic credit. Now that's something very profound and interesting. And I know some of you might be thinking, does it mean all our actions which are performed are sanctioned by super soul? Yes, correct. Second part, does it mean a criminal who had just gone and robbed the bank or who had just gone and killed an innocent person, according to this philosophy, his action was also sanctioned by Lord? Yes. Oh my goodness, how the Lord can be so cruel. How can he make such a system where he blindly, based on a karmic credit, he sanctions the desires of both of the sinful and the pious person? Why Lord has to do like this? Why Lord, if he has the control, prohibits a sinful person from performing sinful actions? How many of you are thinking like this? And how many of you think it's a valid question? Yes or no? Sorry, I can't see you all, so I have to interact with you on a chat only. So I get to see how many of you are able to connect with this. Yes, that's the reason people fail to understand the whole philosophy, whole under subject matter of God. See, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 9, chapter verse number 29, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshu astina priya. In other words, Krishna says, I am equal to everyone. I do not envy or I do not favor. Lord is impartial, just like a sunlight falls in the house of both of a pious and a sinful person. Oh, then you may say it means Lord is not intelligent. Then why did Lord create such a system? I mean, if he was intelligent, he would have prohibited a sinful person from performing a sinful action. Whereas the Lord says, I am not the one who is giving you those desires. I have created a system. If you desire pious things or good things, and if you have a karmic balance where I can sanction it, if I sanction it, then I have created a law of karma. And that is the third thing. The law of karma holds us responsible for making the right desires or the wrong desires. So Lord is not responsible, but Lord has created the system because we came to this material world to get our desires fulfilled. And Lord, like a loving Father, gives us an opportunity to fulfill that desire in a regulated manner where He has created a system of law of karma. If you desire sinful things, you get a punishment. And if you desire pious things, and that's what gets sanctioned, and you act on it, then you get a pious result. That's the point of it. So when Lord sanctions, how does an action still performed? Then the sanction of the Lord goes to the material nature. This body is also made up of sattva, raja, and tamoguna. Bhumirapu, nalovayu, khamano, buddhirevacha. This body is also a gift of the material nature, and that material nature works under the direction of the Lord. So when the Lord sanctions it, then the material nature carries out the actions to suit our desires. To give you a quick example to make you the subject matter easy, for example, you want to buy a car, let's say a Swift car. You go to the bank manager to get a loan. Bank manager is going to look at your credit history. And if you have a good credit history, he'll give you a loan. Once the loan is sanctioned by a bank manager, then the company, let's say Suzuki, will allow you to take the car away. Yes or no? However, if the bank manager, looking at your credit history record, does not sanction your loan, then the owner, then the Suzuki, the manager at the Suzuki branch will not allow you to carry or will not allow you to take the Swift car along with you. That's the whole system. To do a quick reflection to help you understand this, that how ultimately it is the desires, our desires, that fructifies into an action depending on what gets sanctioned by the Lord. And Lord is impartial. He is not affected by our sin or our pious activity. He is totally neutral. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita himself many times this particular thing. I wanted to just quickly reflect and say yes or no. Let's say you performed a good action. You gave a charity. You fed a poor person. Do you think behind that action there was a desire to do that act? Or you just acted abruptly? Yes or no? For example, you're sitting and attending this class. Do you think there was a desire that actually, made you to come and attend the program? Or you just crash landed abruptly? There is nothing abruptly happens. It all happens because of the desires that we have. And that's the reason it's very important to understand how the desires are cultivated. And the desires are cultivated according to the association we keep. And that's the reason in spiritual culture, association is given such an importance. If we are taught to take association of saintly people, we are also taught to give up the bad association. Give up the association of the movies, the cinemas, the media, the TV program, which all feeds us junk. So, to give you a summary of the subject matter, how it functions, let's do it pictorically. The jiva can only desire. He desires, the desire is heard by the super soul residing in the heart of a living entity, every living entity, Ishvara or super soul. He checks the credit history or the karmic account balance. And if the account balance allows, then that Ishwar, the Supreme Personality, sanctions to the Prakriti or orders to the Prakriti. And then Prakriti performs an action and then facilitates you. To give you an example, imagine you had been thinking of buying a Honda City, which is probably a little expensive for your budget. You had been thinking for, every year, maybe this year I would have enough money to purchase it. You don't want to take a bank loan. You're just thinking somewhere I would have enough savings and I'll purchase it. Your desire has been there for a particular time. Suddenly, this particular year, you get a bonus amount, a big bonus amount from a company. Not only a bonus amount, you're given a promotion with an increased paycheck. Suddenly things become so favorable for you. You might have heard of this. Nothing happens before time. Our elders would always tell us, beta, nothing happens before time. What does it mean? Now finally Lord has sanctioned that desire, and Prakriti has get into a role play where she has arranged for you to get a promotion, get a bonus and whatnot, and suddenly you have enough money to buy a car for yourself. That's the whole thing about it. However, the irony of these material desires, you may become temporarily happy, but desire is not satisfied. If you have got a Honda City, of course, next you're looking at Mercedes Benz. And that is what the irony with fulfilling material desires. A person always keep on asking for a better and more. Now, that's not only when your desire gets fulfilled. The journey of getting your desire fulfilled is itself so painful, so difficult. You have to work so hard. Imagine what would happen when the desire is not fulfilled. When the desire is not sanctioned, it leads to rejection and hopelessness. And that is the irony of this whole game of material desires. And that is what Lord Shri Krishna is going to speak in the next section. So I'll just speak, I'll just skip out this part, or maybe I'll just quickly ask this question. I have a poll here, and then we'll go to the next. Oh, stop sharing visual is going on because we're little late on time today. So imagine somebody asks you this question. What would be your answer now? What you have understood and heard of Bhagavad Gita right now. If somebody asks you this, is Supreme Lord responsible for all our sufferings and pleasures? Now, what we just discussed about three doers, who do you think is responsible? Is Supreme Lord because he sanctioned it? It's material nature because she provided it? Or it is I because I desired it? So, to conclude the subject matter, the last point here is how do I purify these desires that I have? How can I purify these desires, the material desires? And Lord Shri Krishna, in this context, not Lord Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the process of purifying the desires. And that is Cheto Darpanam Marjanam Baba Mahadvagni Nirvapanam Shreyo Kerva Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam. In essence, the process of purifying the desires begins with chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, where here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu compares our consciousness, our heart, with a darpan, with a mirror, which is covered over with a lot of dirt. And if you want to clear the dirt, you have to dust it out. Then only you can see yourself clearly in the mirror. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the means to purify or the clean our heart, which is accumulated of the dirt of Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Matsarya for millions and millions of lifetimes. And we have had many examples, hippies, Srila Prabhupada's initial students in America, everyone with the process of chanting of the holy names of the Lord got purified and became saintly. And that is the power of association. Association, here you're taking an association of the Lord through the process of chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Similarly, while reading Bhagavad Gita, taking association of saintly people, it all purifies our desires and gives us different set of desires. In the association of devotees, we develop spiritual desires. We develop a desire to develop relationship with the Lord. We develop a desire to live an anxiety-free life, develop a desire to go back to God. And that is the subject matter of three doers. It is very easy to assume the mentality that I am the controller and the breadwinner. Lord Shri Krishna explains that is not the fact. At your side and my side, we can only desire. Krishna sanctions based on our karmic account, and in Prakriti, which carries out the action, not I. And that is what Lord Shri Krishna says in 3rd chapter, 27th verse. Prakriti kriyamanani gudha karmani sarvasha. Ahankara vimudatma kartaham niti manyate. But a fool, he thinks I am the doer. But with this subject matter, I believe it's very clear for all of us. We are not the doer, but it is Krishna who is the doer. To give you an example and conclude this section to go to the next section of chapter 5, we are like an infant. Just like an infant learns to walk by holding the finger of the father, similarly, we live our life in this world always dependent on the Lord. We are not independent. We are always holding his finger, and the Lord is present in our heart as super soul, and he is providing us based on our qualification, based on our karmic credit. That's the whole point. When Arjuna heard this, he was amazed to realize that, oh, really? If I'm not the doer, that makes it very clear. Now I can perform karma yoga as a service to you because I just have to desire. However, here Arjuna asks, my dear Lord, how does such a person, in this knowledge that he is not a doer, who knows that you are the Supreme Personality of God and who understands his position, how does such a person act? And here, before I proceed ahead, I want to ask all of you, is already 7 o'clock. Can I take 10 minutes for a discussion and conclude chapter 5 quickly? Is that all right for everyone? If any one of you are too tight with your time, you're welcome to quit. And if in case you have time, you can hear it later on. I'll be more careful tomorrow with the time. But chapter 5 is a little difficult and had some important concepts. So I thought of spending time. So here Arjuna thinks, my dear Lord, how does such a person who has this knowledge about you, about his own existence, who knows, your nature, who knows one's own nature, how does such a person act? Lord Shri Krishna then begins to speak the third aspect or the third section of this chapter 5, which is E for equal vision, which means what is the vision of a spiritualist? Since the super soul resides in every living being, the advanced spiritualist, Krishna says, is able to see every life, be it a plant, animal, or a human being, as a temple of God. And thus, Lord Shri Krishna says in 5th chapter, 18th verse, very, very famous and very profound verse. If you have the opportunity, you can recite along with me. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Suni Chaiva Sapake Cha Pandita Samadarshina. In essence, what is a learned person? He does not see the body, he sees the spirit within the body. And thus he sees everyone with an equal vision, where he sees everyone as a part and parcel of the Lord. Because the soul doesn't have a gender. Soul doesn't have a male and female. Soul doesn't have a human form, animal form like that. Soul is spirit. It is an eternal part and parcel of the Lord. In this way, only a spiritualist can offer utmost respect to every living entity. Different bodies with different qualities are produced according to one's past actions. Yet, each entity residing within that body is of the same spiritual nature, Sat Chit Ananda. Therefore, only a spiritualist or a bhakti yogi can only be free of racism, nationalism, sexism, and also speciesism, discriminating species. For example, or just to give you the true picture of the world today, the population of human population in this world today is 7 billion. 7 billion population. And every year, 72 billion animals are butchered for the sake of humans' appetite. So the importance, you can understand the importance of this knowledge. As we suffer, we feel the pain. Similarly, animals also feel. But people out of ignorance don't recognize and they think that is meant as for their food. That's the level of ignorance. So when Arjuna heard this, he said, my dear Lord, chasing after a material he's thinking, he realized that actually, my dear Lord, chasing after material desire is useless. And not only useless, it's harmful because it's a painful process. Look at a spiritualist. He treats everyone equally. He lives a life without anxiety. Then why do people waste their time chasing after sensual desires? This is totally useless. Lord Shri Krishna says, yeah, that's the point. It's totally useless. It is foolish. And then Lord Shri Krishna speaks another very, very classic verse. 5th chapter, 22nd verse. Ye hi samsparshaja bhoga dukha yoniya evate adiyantavanta kaunteya nate shuramate buddhaha. Before I explain you the meaning, I'm not sure if I have the poll for it. Okay, all right. So, okay, I haven't shared the result of the previous. So this was the result of the previous poll, and where all of you agreed for that. So let me ask a question to all of you. You may reply yes or no. Imagine rasgulla is your favorite sweet, and you're walking on a street, and you see on the corner of the you see with the corner of your eye a shop, a sweet shop, and right on the front there are rasgullas, freshly cooked rasgullas. and you love rasgullas. Of course, by default, all of us gonna feel like eating it. You walk up to the shop, you tell the shopkeeper to give you rasgulla, he feeds you 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. My question is, how many can you eat? After 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, imagine 20 is your capacity. You are going to say, enough, I cannot eat. At that point of time, you will feel that that's it, I have relished it. But the irony of this sense pleasure, after a few hours, when it is digested, again you will develop an hankering. Wish I could have had more rasgullas. Yes or no? Is that correct? Do you agree with this? And that is what Lord Shri Krishna says. Because of this whole cycle of a hankering, dukkha yoni, ये जो sense pleasure है, is nothing but a yoni. It only gives dukkha. Why dukkha? Krishna says two things. Adi, it has a beginning, and antavanta, it has an end. It is not permanent. That's the reason Krishna says, Na te shuramate Buddha. That's the reason an intelligent person does not relish or does not find his happiness in sense pleasure. To give you an example, there was this man who had visited one of our temples from Germany. You know, ISKCON is famous for prasadam. I hope all of you would have eaten prasadam at ISKCON temples, and they make some fantastic sweets. So this German who had come, he was visiting our temple, he was living in a guest house, and there he was offered a pineapple halwa. He was so attracted by that pineapple halwa, he loved it so much, he called the Govinda guy and he told, please get me a bucket full of pineapple halwa. I just love it. I want to eat whole night. And you don't know what? He did it. Can you imagine a bucket full of pineapple halwa? He kept on eating, and around midnight, he called up the guest house attendant. He said, emergency, emergency, I'm not able to breathe. The attendant came and he saw this person was on the ground, almost unconscious. The ambulance was called and he was rushed to the operation theater. The doctor said, there is only one thing that can be done to save the life of this German. We have to cut open his belly and we have to take out the what is this, halwa from his body, because he has overstuffed his body of this pineapple halwa. And it's a true story. You know, he still has a surgery mark on his belly because his belly was cut open and the halwa was taken out so that there could be a space for him to breathe in. That's the reason the sense pleasure is said to be dukkha yoni. And here I'll just make one last point on the psychology of the sense pleasure. Please pay attention, very interesting. When a person sees a sense object, as I said, gulab jamun or rasgulla, a person becomes agitated and excited. Yes, I'm going to have it. But actually, it is only an imagined happiness, which is simply the intense expectation of a satisfaction that never comes. I'll say that again. It's only an imagined happiness, which is simply the intense expectation of a happiness or a satisfaction that never comes. Imagine your manager calls you and gives you a passport stamp with a US visa and a ticket next week to travel to America. Of course, not today, beyond COVID time, when everything is okay. And this is for the first time you've got a visa sanction, for the first time you're going to travel to America. How many of you agree? You will start daydreaming from today onwards, thinking about where all I'm going to travel in my American visit. I'm going to go for Niagara Falls. I'm going to visit Las Vegas, of course, Hollywood. I'm not going to miss out. And what about the Disneyland? That's on my top list. How many of you agree that the moment the passport stamp with the visa will be given in your hand with the ticket, you would be daydreaming about what all you're going to do it? Yes or no? That's not going to happen. Now, tell me, what is the reality? When you end up to America, you know the reality is different. Maybe for a near future, maybe in this trip, you may not even get a chance to visit Disneyland or anything because you have been sent there to work, not to move around and spend money. And that is how the sense pleasure cheats her. So then when Arjuna heard it, that comes to the last section, then he said, my dear Lord, how we can ever find true peace? It's so disturbing. How can we find true peace in this world? Lord Shri Krishna said, yes, Arjuna, I agree. Sense gratification is painful. and more painful than enjoying the sense object is a painful journey that we have to undergo to acquire the sense object. And once you have it, then you want to have it more. So Arjuna says, my dear Lord, please tell me, how can we be peaceful? Because in such a way, a person can never be happy and never be peaceful. And that brings us to the last section of chapter 5, where Lord Shri Krishna speaks about the peace formula. Krishna explains that we all have come empty-handed in this world and we go empty-handed. And in turn, however, in between, because of our claims to proprietorship and attachments to various objects, it creates fear, insecurities, and conflict in our mind. In this situation, we forget that change is a constant theme in this world. Just like our relationships are changing, our environment is changing. Similarly, our possessions are changing, our clothes are changing, and also our desires are changing. Krishna says, to the extent we develop a sense of detachment, which means understanding the Supreme Lord is the ultimate controller, proprietor, and owner. To that degree, we will find satisfaction. To the degree we understand we are just a caretaker. Just like you're living in a rented house, you can be evicted anytime. It's a signed agreement. You are allowed to live there for 2 years. Similarly, it's a rented house. This body is a rented house we are living in, where an agreement is signed for a certain amount of time. A living entity is going to rent this body. And when the agreement is over, that is called as death. The person leaves. When a person has this understanding that this is a temporary place, I should stop making an arrangement for permanent happiness in a rented accommodation because it doesn't belong to me. That is how and then only a person can ever become happy in this world. Last verse in the concluding part. Bhoktaram yagna tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam Jnanatvamam Shanti Mrachati. Only a person can attain Shanti, one who knows that I am the Supreme CEO. What is a Supreme CEO? I am the Supreme Controller, Supreme Enjoyer, and Supreme Owner, CEO. I own everything, which not I, I mean Lord. Krishna is the Supreme Controller. Bhoktaram Yagna Sapasam, which means he is a benefactor of all yagyas and sacrifices that we perform. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, he is not only our God, he is not only God of the plants, animals, birds, and species, he is also God of the gods of the Devatas. He is Parameshwaram. Suridam Sarvabhutanam, and he is a true friend of every living entity. Jnanatva, only those who understand this truth about the Supreme Personality of Godhead can live peacefully in this temporary world. With that, we come to the conclusion of chapter 5, where the acronym was STEP, where 4 things we discussed. First was the glories of Karma Yoga, where Krishna says you should perform your duties. That is the best means for you to purify your consciousness. Second, we discussed about the concept of doer. Who is doer? There are 3 doers, Atma, Paramatma, and Prakriti. Ultimately, we are held responsible because of our desires. So we need to change our desires, and we change our desires in the association of saintly people. Third, the vision of a spiritualist. The vision of a spiritualist unifies and brings harmony because he sees the presence of Lord in every living entity across the species. And finally, how to find peace in this world? Understand 3 things, not 3 things, understand only one thing. Krishna is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we are eternal part and parcel. And we all have experience of this, that we are not the ultimate controller. We are not the one who fulfills all our desires. When the right time happens, then our desires, some desire gets fulfilled, not all desires. And that is enough evidence to tell us that we are always dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. With that, we come to a conclusion of chapter 5. Kindly excuse me, I went almost 10 minutes ahead of time. I'll be more careful tomorrow. With that, we pause here, and tomorrow we'll be discussing chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, the yoga, the what is that yoga, the Lord Shri Krishna speaks, and that will be the end of the first section of Bhagavad Gita. We'll discuss more details tomorrow about it. With that, thank you all for your kind attention and listening to this session on chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. Gaurav, back to you. If anyone has any questions, any clarification, we can have that.
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
And before you sign out, just to have a personal relationship, it's a personal request. If possible, all of you may just switch on your camera. So at least I get to know who all are there. Because Krishna consciousness is all about personal relationships. That can only happen, at least I know who is there. So yes, thank you.
Yes.
Gaurav, please go ahead.
Thank you, Prabhu. Before going on to the questions and queries, I just wanted to make a small announcement because we are taking an attendance or making a record that who all are attending these sessions and who all have registered initially. So while in this session, many of you didn't have your name properly. Some are having the iPhone or some alphanumeric numbers. So it is difficult for us to match that, yes, you are the same person. So kindly rename your, whenever you log into Zoom with your name properly, which you have registered, so that we can have a proper tracking.
The point is, at the end of this course, for all the participants and those who solve all the quizzes, there will be a certificate. So for that reason, Gaurav is asking that.
Yes.
Yes, Gaurav, let's proceed.
Prabhu, there is a little disturbance from your end, again, because I am speaking like that. Or
that's all right. I fixed it. Okay now?
Okay. Yes. So first question is from Chaya Mataji. She's asking, all incarnations, demigods, sages, Vedas are all in India. Why?
It's an interesting question. Now, what we know of, however, when it comes to scriptures, okay, let's go this way. The first thing, scriptures describes Bharatvarsh as to be a land of piety, the most pious land. Just like Kurukshetra, Dhritarashtra said Dharmashetra, Kurukshetra. He didn't say Dharmashetra, Hastinapure. He said Kurukshetra because Kurukshetra was a Dharmashetra. Similarly, in this whole planet, Bharat Bhumi is the Dharmashetra. Just like when you buy a house, when you purchase a land or whatever, don't you look into the Vastu Shastra of that? Don't you look at that the place has to be appropriate? So when Lord has to appear, is of course going to appear in the most appropriate place. He's not going to appear in any place like that. So Lord Shri Krishna, or all the incarnations for that reason, not that all the incarnations have appeared in Bharatvarsha. When it is said Bharatvarsha in scripture, Bharatvarsha refers to the whole world. So just like Nrsimhadev appeared, but where did he actually appear? We can't say he appeared in India. Of course, there is an Ahobilam which says Lord appeared there, but still, So the point is, the Lord appears, first of all, is fully independent. Secondly, he appears at the most dharmic and the most pious place. So you should be proud of being born in Bharatvarsha. That is what scripture says. That those who are born in this pious land of Bharatvarsha are the most fortunate people in this world, because by default, because of the culture and Sanskriti, they are influenced to take to spiritual culture. So that's your and my credit. So we should be proud of the birth. And that's the whole idea about it. All right.
Prabhu, next question is from Tarun Prabhu. He's asking, how can an athlete motivate himself if he disassociates from the result of winning?
Oh, interesting question. Well, similar thing, something which I tell to the students also. You should work, when we describe the Karma Yoga in 3rd chapter, we give the definition of Karma Yoga as detached and dutiful. So you have to perform your duty nicely. You cannot be lazy about it. Now, some motivation is needed. So have this motivation that I'm going to do the best performance. I'm going to win it. And by that, I'm going to glorify Lord Shri Krishna. Because when I win it, people get to know that I won it and I am a devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. Or if people come and ask me, who is behind this victory for you? Don't say your name, say Krishna. So with that consciousness, you'll work sincerely. Now, think about it for a second. Let's say you did not win it. You will not be that much disheartened because Krishna did not demand it from you that he will be pleased only when you win the race. Because Krishna says, I am pleased by your attempt. So in Krishna's eyes, you are a winner, regardless of if you win the victory, you win the trophy or not. So in this case, you're totally happy. But imagine if you would have worked hard for your own agenda so that to have a name and fame and recognition, your own prestige. So you work hard for that. And if Krishna, as we spoke about the three doer, if Krishna does not sanction your desire, as we discussed, then you become totally disheartened. So the journey is painful. And if you fail, then the end result is painful. So working for Krishna in that consciousness is always beneficial. So as Krishna says, use the result. If you win, then glorify Krishna. Just like George Harrison, a very, very famous singer from UK. He wrote songs in glorification of Lord Shri Krishna. And Prabhupada said, George Harrison said, my dear Srila Prabhupada, I want to renounce and join Brahmachari ashram. Prabhupada said, you are doing far much more greater service than the sannyasis. Go back and keep writing songs about Krishna. That was Prabhupada. And he used his name, fame, in glorifying Krishna. I know so many of Prabhupada disciples from Europe and America who came to Krishna consciousness because of the songs of George Harrison. If you are not aware of George Harrison, go to YouTube, type George Harrison, and write down the name of the song, My Sweet Lord. And you can look into the history of that song, which was a top song in whole of Europe for months altogether. Gaurav Prabhu, next.
Yes, Prabhu, next question is from Mukesh Prabhu. He's asking, as per today's discussion, Karma Yoga is better than renunciation. That is Jnana Yoga. Where as per the yoga ladder, Jnana Yoga is superior and better than Karma Yoga. So it's not very clear.
Yeah, so good question. Mukesh, again, it is not the hierarchy as we see in the yoga ladder. From the yoga perspective, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, they are all on the same level. But the gradations is given based on the qualification of a performer. If you perform Karma Yoga, the result is same as a person from Jnana Yoga will get. But to perform Jnana Yoga, you need a qualification. That's the reason Jnana Yoga is shown in a higher stature than the Karma Yoga. Therefore, that's the reason Krishna says, Arjuna, you take to Karma Yoga because you are not qualified to practice Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga is more difficult. So you take Karma Yoga, and there is no difference in Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga because it will bring you to the same result. Is that clear, Mukesh? You can unmute.
Mukesh Prabhu, you can unmute. Hare Krishna. Mukesh Prabhu, you are there?
Or else, if you're clear with that, just give me a thumbs up because I can see you. Okay, that's clear.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
And my request, Gaurav, whoever name you're taking out, if they can just switch on their camera so at least I know who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
Next.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I was not able to unmute earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Gaurav. Yes. Okay, sure.
So next question is from Dr. Sachin. His question is, I work for an organization whereby the revenue comes and it is used
Is he still online? If you are there, please switch on your camera so at least I can see. So we know we are answering your question when you're there.
Dr. Sachin, I could not see him.
Okay, we'll take it later on then. Let's address those who are there right now.
Okay. Then so I'm checking. These are the initial questions that came. After that, a lot of... okay. Next question is from Tarun. How do we know which desire will take us to Lord and which will take away from Lord?
So the desire, if you have a desire for, first of all, is to begin the pious living, you know, and pious living, we have to make a distinction between karma and vikarma. And that distinction is clear by following four regulatory principles: no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit relationship. So that brings you on a track of a human life. And then take to spiritual culture. And then you are on the safe route. Anything, any desire that takes you or that distracts you from practicing spiritual culture is a threat to your spiritual practice. That's it. That's how we can understand that. Prabhu, next.
Prabhu, there are no more questions in the chat window, but there is
All
a,
right.
yeah, there is one.
Somebody want to speak up
No, yeah,
directly? Speak up
Prabhu,
directly, then
yes,
they can
Bura
unmute.
Prabhu, Bura Prabhu, you can unmute and ask. Yes.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for the very nice lecture. Actually, I have a small doubt in the regarding the desire. For example, in my case, sometimes I think of waking up early in the morning and do chanting, complete my rounds and all these things. But most of the time it won't happen. So whether the desire has the limits, like desire is so strong, desire is weak, desire has a medium limit, and sometimes we think we
It's
have
not
to
a
do.
it's not a question of desire, it's a question of determination,
Okay.
which Srila Prabhupada speaks about it. We are not having determination enough to do that. Prabhupada was asked, Prabhupada, what if I don't have determination? Prabhupada said, then you're an animal. The point here is, as a human, we have the determination to make a choice and to do it. Now, to wake up in the morning, now let's look into that three-doer concept. Let's assume Paramatma has sanctioned for you. So how Prakriti is going to play a role for you? A Prakriti will play a role in the sense, may create all the best facility, where you have the opportunity, where your work have ended in time, where you possibly have finished your dinner in time, you have chanted all your rounds, you have nothing to do late night. And there are no mosquitoes today to bite you and disturb you in your sleep. Everything is favorable. But you, because you or I or whoever, we lack determination, we spend our time here and there wasting on some petty issues. Where I know I should be sleeping early, so I wake up early, we don't do that. So if you reflect deeply, in between we got some other desire which Krishna fulfilled through Prakriti, which was against your previous desire.
Okay.
And that's the reason we fail to get up in the morning. So you have to think about it. So to deal on a practical basis, work on a determination. I have decided it, I'll do it. Where do you live, Vinayak?
In Dhanori Prabhu.
Dhanori, where is this?
Pune Prabhu.
Oh, Pune. No problem. We'll chat separately. I'll make sure you're charged up enough. I'll give you my number and I'll make sure you give me morning, evening attendance, you woke up or not. If not, I'll give you a 4 o'clock morning call. When I get up, after a week, definitely you'll get enough determination to get up. Sometimes we need somebody standing on our head to make sure we act. All right. Kara Prabhu, what's next?
Yes, Prabhu. Next question is from Devashish Prabhu. I could not understand this question properly. What is
We
prana and apana vayu?
These are different values. I'll give you the reference. You can read about it.
Okay.
Kara Prabhu, next.
Next question is from Koshag Prabhu. Prabhuji has mentioned one should give portion of result in service of Lord. So in material senses, if one wishes for material desire and give a portion in service of Lord, is it not trade?
It's not trade. That is called Sakama Karma Yoga. That's what you can do. You cannot give your desires fully. So, all right, engage your desires. Engage yourself accordingly. And then at least recognize the Lord, Supreme Lord provides you everything by reciprocating Him, by acknowledging His presence, by doing some service to Him. That way, of course, that's not the best path, but that's a beginning stage. And this is part of Karma Yoga and it purifies you. So don't be discouraged. So be acknowledge where you are and try to act. Try to get some karma yoga in action in your life. That's the point. Try to do some part of it. And
Right.
slowly we'll be purified of our consciousness of these desires, and then we'll become more mature in understanding and will act accordingly. You cannot prematurely act on someone else's level if you're not qualified for it. So lastly, about trade, that's not trade. That is Krishna's system to help us purify. Gaurav, now better people ask themselves, because I know whose question we are answering, they're there.
Yes. Yes,
So
Prabhu.
somebody have written a question, you can tell them to unmute and speak up.
Yeah. So maybe just to add on Kushal Prabhu, so maybe trading is something when we pre-attemptedly desire something from God and say that, okay, if this is full, then I'll do that. So maybe that something comes as part of trade.
Trading comes in karma kanda. My dear Lord, please fulfill my desire. Get me a visa for America. If I get it, मैं आपको 100 रुपए का मिठाई चढ़ाऊंगा. Where first you demand result, then you go back and give something. That's karma kanda.
Yeah. So next query is from Preetam Khanna Prabhu or Mataji. So please unmute yourself and ask the query. Yeah, sorry. Preetam Mataji, yes. You can unmute.
Hello, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Can you hear
Hare
me?
Krishna. Very well.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I wanted to ask one question. Like, if Bhagavad Gita tells us that we should be away from material pleasures, then should we not try for better job prospects for our financial security of our family? Should we not
Wonderful.
invest our time on that?
Wonderful question. Lord Shri Krishna does not say to be away from material pleasure. There's a little difference in sense gratification and the desires for sense gratification. You know, we have a devotee in ISKCON by the name of Ambrish, who is a grandson of Henry Ford. His name is Alfred Ford. He's a grandson of Ford Motors Company owner. You know, so it's not that because he became a devotee of Krishna when Srila Prabhupada was present, he became his disciple. So he gave up his property possessions with the Ford company. It's not that he shut down his business. Your question is something just like how to stay motivated in winning the race. Do it nicely, but with detachment. Please mark this definition of karma yoga: detached and beautiful. Perform your duties nicely, but don't get too much absorbed in it, which happens because of attachment to the results. Yes, if you do something, you are caught up in the consciousness of the result, just like stock market. Stock market is very dangerous. It works on the attachment or result only. You invest with the idea of the result, yes or no? As your stock market goes up and down, similarly the heartbeat goes up and down. That is dangerous. You're a family person. You have to find security. You have to arrange for that family security, future security, have enough earning. But understand, ultimately it is Krishna who is the controller. The results are not based on my efforts alone. Results are dependent on what Krishna awards us based on our karmic account. So let me peacefully do my work. Peacefully doesn't mean lazily. Let me do my work dutifully. And let Krishna give me what he gives me. But this is not that easy to understand. It involves a little thorough understanding and training of consciousness. Because when it means Krishna awards a result, by default, our ignorance steps in. And we think, let Krishna do, why should I work? That becomes dangerous. So you have to have a balance. So please try to think more on the subject matter. And to be able to apply in your life, we have to take to the process of chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Because that cultivates Sattva Guna. And only at the platform of Sattva Guna will be able to apply things properly, what Krishna says, not otherwise. Okay, so it all begins with Krishna Prasadam and Krishna chanting. Sevan Mukhahi Jivvahadu Swayam Eva Spurati Yadha. Rupa Goswami says. Thank you. Making sense? Okay, okay.
Hare Krishna. Next query is from Anushri Mataji. Mataji, you are there. You can unmute and ask your query.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hello.
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I have a question that as I went through your session, it's all about karmic reactions, like your karmic account, and that's why you get what you're getting right now. So my question is, can we change the karmic reactions? Like, for example, if somebody is very ill, and he's like having a lot of difficulties in the present life, maybe I believe that it is all because of the karmas in the past. So is there any way that this can be changed, or we can improve our things so that the things, the difficulty or the severity of that illness is like down or something like that? Can we change the karmic reactions?
Prabhu, you are on mute.
Hey Krishna, am I audible?
Little disturbance.
1 second. Let me just fix the sound again. There is a screen. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu.
So I'll just paraphrase Anushri's question here. So Anushri is asking, please correct me if I am wrong in understanding, but what I understood, Krishna speaks about karma and the reactions and the results. If someone is suffering, is there some way we can help the person alleviate or free him from suffering so that he doesn't have to face the reactions of his past sinful life? Because today he may not be doing those, but he have done it in the past, but because of the law of karma, he have to face it today. Is there something we can help that person to get rid of that suffering? Is that the point?
Yes, Prabhuji, yes.
In 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st chapter, verse number 15. Please make a note of this verse for yourself. Read the purport. Kechit kevalya bhaktya Vasudev Parayanah Agham Dunvanti Kasnena Niharam Eva Bhaskaraha. Here, Sukdev Goswami is speaking to Parishit Maharaj, and he says, Kechit Kevalya Bhaktya, only a person who has taken to a full Krishna conscious, who has taken full shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Kechit Kevalya Bhaktya Vasudeva Parayana, who has taken shelter of Lord. Agham Dunvanti Kasnena. Agham means all kinds of sinful reactions. Dunvanti are destroyed. Karsnena, which means completely. And not only reactions are destroyed, even the desires to do those sinful activities are destroyed. And in this particular section, we discuss or we study that only through bhakti we can purify our desires. So yes, that's possible through the process of bhakti. But if you are already suffering, that time for a person to take full shelter of the Lord becomes very difficult. Let me ask this question to you. If you are sick, do you agree or not that your mind becomes very agitated and it's very difficult to focus?
I agree. I completely agree.
Then it's just not possible. That's the reason in the chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, when we concluded, I gave this point that please see this message of Bhagavad Gita to prepare yourself to deal with the calamities. Don't say that I don't have any calamities, so I don't need it. My dear friend, calamities are inevitable for everyone. So understand the message of Bhagavad Gita, accept spiritual culture, practice it, so it prepares you to deal with the calamity which is inevitable for everyone. Is there anyone who can say, Prabhu, I am not going to have any calamity? My dear sir, the biggest calamity is death, either of yours or of some relatives, which will be very painful. So calamity is inevitable. So that's the importance of taking message of Bhagavad Gita. So yes, scripture says so. We can be freed from all sinful reactions for those who have taken full shelter of the Supreme Lord. Is that all right, Anushri?
Prabhuji, I understood what you said. Like, for example, okay, let me prepare for that, for inevitable.
What do I do if I'm already in the
Yes,
soup?
correct, correct. That's what my question is. If somebody, as you said, if somebody is ill right now, the person might not be in the state to do that bhakti. That person might be in some different.
Correct.
So how do that person get out of, that karmic reactions? Because right now he cannot do
Got it.
bhakti maybe. Yeah.
Correct. So two things to it. First thing is, because right now that person is suffering, now is the best time to speak to that person about why we suffer.
Okay.
What is the reason for our suffering? Now the person will be willing to understand law of karma. Now he will understand, I am not the supreme controller, God exists. So it's a good time of philosophical discussion to help him understand. And Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter, there are 4 kinds of beings who come to take shelter of the Lord. And one of them is artho, which means distressed, who is in suffering. That's the first part of it. Now, second part, just skipped my head. Your question was what to do for that person who is in suffering right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so he can easily understand it. He can take advantage of this situation, which will help him become serious in Krishna consciousness. Something else was there in my mind, it just skipped out, but that's the point. If it comes back, I'll tell you again what was the second point to it. But yeah, so this is the time when he can hear whatever has happened, at least he can fix his future, right or no?
Yes.
And second thing, you at least, if you have understood Bhagavad Gita, the reality of life, you should understand that person may say whatever, but ultimately it is that person only responsible for his or her situation.
Yes.
So that person only has to take a responsibility to fix his problem, her problem. At your side, you can help him, pray for him or her. Ultimately, we individually have to take a step forward.
Agreed.
So that person takes a step forward, would recover. Just like you cannot stuff a medicine in the mouth of a grown-up person. Yes or no?
Yes. Yes, Prabhuji.
You can take him a doctor. Doctor gives a prescription. He has to do it. He has to practice it. That's the whole point. It's up to now. I don't need those so much. No. Not right, so cold. Yes.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, next query is from Suren. Prabhu, you can unmute and ask your query.
The kitchen, we can heat it up now. Help kitchen. You can't take out from my plate now. Figure it out. Yes, sorry. Please go ahead.
Suren Prabhu, we are not able to hear you. No, Prabhu, not yet. Oh, you are muted now. Prabhu, you have mentioned the query, so I'll read it out. In acronym T stands for 3 doers, and the Lord Krishna told Arjuna he is doers, and then question asked in his screen, is Supreme Lord responsible for all our sufferings and pleasure? So maximum people choose second option. No, I am to be blamed as I desired it. So how can it justify? Please explain why not third option, material nature to be blamed as arranged it.
Yeah, you cannot blame somebody else because you asked for it, right? Imagine you go to a hotel. No, let's put it this way. Right now, the COVID situation is there. Government has told you not to go out. But imagine somebody goes out and gets a COVID. Whom would you blame? The government, the COVID virus, or the person who went out? So then you can type in the chat box. We can communicate that way. The government has said, don't go out. You have told that person, don't go out. But that person goes out, gets the COVID virus. Whom would you blame? Number 1, government. Number 2, COVID virus. Why did he infect it? Number 3, the person who did not follow. So then you can type in, say with the 1, 2, 3. 1 is government.
Person.
You can raise your finger.
He typed
2,
person.
Typed? Yeah, person. Yeah. That's the whole idea. That's the student. Krishna, through his scriptures, have already given us the instructions what to do, what not to do. But if we still don't follow, we need to be blamed. To give another example, imagine, Suren, you climb up a train without a ticket. You climb up a train without a ticket, and a ticket collector comes to you and asks you for a ticket, and you say you don't have a ticket. Then he says you have to pay a fine. You say, sorry, sir, I didn't know the rule. what do you think ticket collector going to say? Oh, Suran, my dear Suran, that's all right. You're so innocent. We forgive you for this time. But my dear Suran, don't do it next time. Do you think the ticket collector is going to tell you like this? Imagine, Suran, a young child goes into the kitchen and he puts his hand in the burning fire. What do you think Agni Devta would tell the child? Oh, my dear child, it's all right. This is your first attempt. Don't worry, I would not burn you. No. In fact, the burning of the hand is the mercy of Agni Devta. Because now the child have learned the lesson that I should not play with the fire. The ticket collector finding you is a mercy of ticket collector on you because you have learned a lesson that I should not climb in the train without a ticket. Similarly, we getting a punishment for our sinful acts is a mercy of the Lord because it tells us we should not do it. All right.
Yeah. Prabhu, next question is from Ravindra Prabhu. Ravindra,
I would like to see, well, okay, Ravindra, I can see him. Yes, Ravindra.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I just want to know whether this is Vishnu is incarnated from Sri Krishna or Sri Krishna is incarnated from.
Srimad Bhagavatam says, Ete chamsa kalha pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Chamsha means all the amshas, all the manifestations, incarnations have appeared from Krishna. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. That's a version of Srimad Bhagavatam. And similarly, Brahma Samhita, Ramadi Murti Shukala Niyamena Tishtan Nana Avatar Karod. Anyways, I forgot. Like that, Krishna Swayam Sambhava Paramapumanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Lord Rama, Ramadi Murti Shukala Niyamena Tishtan, all the different incarnations of the Lord. Nana Avatara Karod, Bhuvaneshu Kintu, Swayam Krishna Swayam Sambhavat, Paramapumano. Krishna is the Param, is the source of all. That's the version of Brahma in Brahma Samhita. Hare Krishna. Gaurav is quite late, it's 7:45. So is there anything else, or maybe one or two questions we conclude because everyone will be getting late for their dinner?
Yeah, there are two more questions from Medhavani Mataji and Deepali Mataji. So maybe we can take those. Medhavani Mataji, you can unmute and ask your query.
Hey Krishna, thank you for the wonderful class.
Yes.
So my question is to reconfirm my understanding if it is correct or not. Okay, so for example, if I'm sick, okay, so if I pray to the Lord, okay, that please relieve me of the sickness so that I can perform devotional service better. So is that considered, because in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says a devotee and a non-devotee perform the same task. It's the consciousness that matters. So is it the right understanding that such kind of prayer is still spiritual because the objective is to perform better devotional service? Is that the right understanding? Please clarify. Thank you.
So are you asking, is it a pure devotional service?
No, I'm asking, is that desire spiritual or material? Because if it is spiritual,
Desire is spiritual.
Yeah, and it's not pure devotional service, but it helps me go on the path or progress on the path of devotional, pure devotional
Spiritual
service,
desire,
right?
because it helps you attain
okay.
the spiritual goal.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Deepali Mataji, now you can unmute.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Actually, my question is very simple. How can we build strong relationship without being attached to the other party? Is it possible?
Well, who's saying not to be attached? Be attached with the person.
But everywhere
Attachment. Well, you're talking about relationship. Let's focus on relationship because the discussion was about on performing duties. Relationships are a little different. You can be very much attached to that person. It's wonderful. But along with our attachment also comes expectations from that person, which is dangerous.
That's the problem because
That's
when we
the
raise
whole
our kids,
thing.
we always
So
have
attachment. Hare Krishna. Somebody was speaking what Kranti looks like. Okay. So coming back to the relationship. So how to develop relationship according to Krishna conscious perspective. According to Krishna conscious perspective, again, in a relationship, we again are detached and dutiful, which means what? The center of relationship is Krishna, where we see other person in relation to Krishna's relationship. Now, let's say your child, let's say your husband, mother, father, depending on relationship, you have certain responsibilities towards them. Understanding that responsibility, you love them, you care them.
Right.
That's totally fine. But the problem arises when you become attached with your expectations, how they should behave. There's where the problem arises, because ultimately each one of us are individual. अगर आप और मैं और हम सब ने भगवान को त्याग दिया, if we can give up our relationship with the Lord, and that Lord who is still with us life after life, then, and we are not listening to that loving Lord who is Sarva Bhutanam, no, what is that? Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, who is a well-wisher of everyone. We cannot give a competition to Krishna in being a well-wisher of others. There is no one as greater a true friend as Krishna. And if I can give up on Krishna and decide not to follow what Krishna says, then how can I expect the other person to follow me? In other words, if the other person has given up on his true friend Krishna, then how can I expect that person to follow me, who I am not Krishna? So we have to give that freedom to another person, and freedom to yourself from misery by not being too attached to the expectation. If we are attached to too much expectations, imagine if Krishna had expectations from us. Poor Lord would have had a constant 24/7, 365 days, millions of years, constant headache. Yes or no? कितना बोलता हूं, सुनता ही नहीं है, क्या हो गया इसको? But Lord says, Samoham sarva bhuteshu, na me dveshti asti na priya. Of course, we cannot take the rule of the Lord, but we should try to act on that. Understanding Krishna and understanding our responsibility in that relationship on behalf of Krishna, we should act and give freedom for that person to act and choose for oneself and himself or herself what they want to do. To that degree, you'll be happy.
You mean to say that raising the kids with certain kind of expectation is wrong? No.
You can have expectation, but once you become attached to that expectation that the kid should produce that result,
right,
you're bringing misery to yourself. You do your best. Be the best mother. But you cannot control their desires because they have lived their own previous life. And accordingly, they have got their own set of desires. When they grow up, those desires gonna manifest.
Sure.
If they prove to be a good citizen, be grateful to the Lord. Don't take the credit because I was the mother. Be grateful to the Lord that the Lord sent such nice kids to you. And unfortunately, if they end up taking some wrong path in life, what can you do? If in case you have the right consciousness of giving them a right training and a culture.
Correct. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you all. We have overextended our discussion now. It's almost 8 o'clock. I can see all of you look so drowsy and sleepy and tired, probably hungry for your dinner. So anyways, good news. We have ended our session half an hour before the previous schedule. So thank you all. Thank you, Gaurav Prabhu, for hosting it.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki.